15 years ago, probably around the time you were in India or just after that, there was a big boom in microfinance. And I say boom, it was very much private equity, venture capital
Mhm.
type of
Yeah.
boom that I'm talking about. And then it fizzled out or went out with a bang. I don't know how you would describe it. What was that all about?
I can tell in very simplistic terms, but obviously, people who are listening to this, who are following this more closely, might find my explanations a bit too simplistic or too high level. But basically, क्या है कि a lot of these organizations started as not for profits. They actually ended up becoming very profitable because because of the fees they were charging, the pace at which they grew, and the interest rates they were charging and stuff like that. And so eventually they ran out of ability to grow with just a not-for-profit base, right? So they had to convert to for-profit entities just to be able to realize their potential for growth. uh, and it is not just कि field में demand क्या थी, it was also तुम्हारे employees हैं, they are asking for avenues to grow, right, and to evolve, and you're saying कि नहीं अब हम we can only remain like 100% organization, because हमारे पास capital नहीं है या जो भी है constraints. So a lot of these ended up transforming into for-profit entities. And that in and of itself, obviously created a lot of conflicts in ideology, in approach, in who you were inviting to the table. And then there were a couple that grew very very fast, and got to the point of IPOs and stuff, and they made millions of dollars. So these people who had started off as not for profit entrepreneurs, they ended up making a lot of money, which more power to them. But I think it really highlighted um it just created this very big ideological rift ki, here's these were all started out with an intention for social impact, like that was the main goal. And yet what it has led to is high profitability and high individual return, and yet the people it was starting to serve, they were better off too, but certainly nowhere close to being millionaires, right? um, and I think that ideological rift became very it was too big to ignore. And so there were grassroots movements that started contesting कि ये बहुत ज़्यादा interest charge करते हैं, they are making so much profit, they are gaining all of this ground. There was a lot of over indebtedness. Many institutions started lending in the same areas, and एक के ऊपर एक लोन दिए जा रहे हैं same family को, and that family is then unable to repay. And so there was a lot of issues like that. So it started off with isolated incidents but became too big to ignore. And then essentially there was a government crackdown. So the government came down and said you can't do business like this, and they just basically tried to shut them down in the state of AP. AP में सबसे ज़्यादा, it was the mecca of microfinance in India, and the government passed a few laws, and they just came down very strongly, and they said you just can't do business. And many of those institutions ended up failing or barely surviving, and everyone got burnt very badly. I mean, people lost 90% of their portfolios and stuff like that. I mean, these organizations. Um, and so that was the fizzling out that happened. So I
There was
think,
some rumors, I don't know how true they were, is that some of these big, highly profitable microfinance companies of that time with not such good books um, didn't pay enough to the right people in power. But
I'm sure ki that may have been part of the story as well. These things are multifaceted, but but I from my vantage point, I feel like ki you can't ignore the ideological, the cultural, the social aspect. The money uh, was like they figured out the money part of it, but they ignored some of these other aspects, and they felt the money would uh, help everyone overlook these other aspects, but it doesn't.